Someone with just a middle school diploma shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony. Since we're on the subject, let me be clear. You're not my mother. And I will never acknowledge you as such. Emily said this with her usual mocking expression. Next to her, Mike continued to smirk, not even bothering to reprimand his daughter for her remarks. Why did they both despise me so much, even though we were supposed to be family? I was always being belittled and treated like a housekeeper, and my spirit had reached its limit. It's true, as Emily said, I only graduated from middle school. To someone like her, who was a top student aspiring to medical school, I must have seemed pathetic. But is it acceptable for someone who plans to save lives as a doctor to look down on others and hurl insults? With these thoughts, I made up my mind. All right, if you feel that strongly, I won't attend the ceremony. But you'll both regret it, I assure you. They laughed off my words as if they were just the grumblings of a sore loser. But in the days to come, they would regret it so much that their faces turned pale. My name is Anna Johnson. I'm just an ordinary housewife, living with my husband Mike and our daughter Emily. Though I say ordinary, our family situation is a bit complicated because, while this is my first marriage, it's Mike's second. We met through a mutual friend and started dating pretty quickly. On one of our dates, he confessed that he was divorced and had a daughter. From what he told me, his ex-wife was quite self-centered, and he had gone through a lot. That must have been tough. So you took custody of your daughter? Yeah, she said the kid would just get in the way, so she didn't want her. Being a single father might be a burden for you. But, Anna, if you're okay with it, would you marry me? He confessed with sincere eyes, and since I was already attracted to him, I accepted his proposal. Oh, I'm so relieved. I was really nervous you might reject me. He looked genuinely relieved and gave me an unguarded, carefree smile. Surely, marrying a man with a child from a previous marriage might not be easy. But we could overcome it together. At that moment, I believed it. Hey, dinner! Where's my dinner? Mike's shouting echoed through the bedroom again tonight. I woke up to his voice, having fallen asleep earlier. It was midnight, a time when everyone would normally be asleep. Dinner? This morning, you said you didn't need any because you'd be working late. I'm hungry. Even if I said I didn't need it, it's a wife's duty to have something ready for her husband at night. He yanked the blanket off me, glaring angrily, and the strong smell of alcohol from him. He was supposed to be working late, but it seemed he'd been out drinking. I'm gonna take a shower now. Have it ready by the time I'm done, got it? His shouting echoed in the room. His furious outburst forced me to reluctantly get up and rub my sleepy eyes as I headed to the kitchen. Mike stomped towards the bathroom, leaving his clothes scattered all over the place. I clearly remembered him saying this morning, I'll be late, so I don't need dinner. Mike often made such unreasonable demands, ignoring my circumstances. According to him, a wife should always consider her husband's needs. Since we got married, he'd changed dramatically. When we were dating, I thought he was considerate, kind, and attentive, but once we got married and started living together, he began treating me like a housemaid. Taking advantage of my not resisting, his behavior escalated. He often came home late, claiming he was working, only to drunkenly insult me when he did. Sometimes, he came home smelling of women's perfume. When I confronted him, he brushed it off, saying he had to entertain clients at such places for work. Stop being paranoid just because I'm not giving you attention. I tried to discuss the obvious signs of infidelity multiple times, but he always dismissed me, saying that wives should obey their husbands in every household. Any attempt to argue only resulted in him yelling that I was the one in the wrong. Eventually, I gave up trying to resist Mike. I knew that expressing my opinions would never be heard. If I could endure his verbal abuse and condescending behavior, then I could maintain some peace. That's what I told myself as I lived each day, trying not to upset him. Hey, are you getting scolded by Dad again? You're really hopeless. This morning, while Mike was nagging and criticizing me, Emily woke up and mocked me with a laugh. My relationship wasn't good not only with Mike but also with his daughter, Emily. When Mike and I were dating, he introduced Emily, who was in elementary school, as his daughter. Since then, she never had a good attitude toward me. Even after we got married and started living together, Emily stubbornly refused to call me anything respectful. I understood she had difficulty calling me mom. But she wouldn't even call me by my name. Hey, you should vacuum my room soon. You should do it regularly without me having to ask. You're really inconsiderate. Emily, you're turning 18 soon. You should clean your room yourself. Emily kept up appearances outside but was messy at home, with her room always cluttered. Empty snack boxes and half-drunk bottles were scattered all over the floor. It's always me who cleans up her room. What? I'm busy. You probably wouldn't understand since you were not going to high school, but I have tests coming up and can't waste time cleaning, okay? Her face twisted in annoyance as she spat out these words, clearly upset by my response. But her room was messy all year round, so it was just an excuse. If I argued further, she would only get more stubborn. All right, but make sure to clean up after your tests. Realizing it was pointless to argue further, I told her this. Fine, as long as you understand. Make sure to clean it while I'm at school. With that arrogant remark, Emily left the room. Just like her father, or even worse, she hurled harsh words at me and treated me like a housemaid. A junior high school graduate is so embarrassing, she often said. Indeed, my highest education was middle school. I couldn't attend high school due to family circumstances, and once she found out, she looked down on me openly. Emily attended one of the top high schools in the area. Now in her senior year, she was aiming for a prestigious medical school and was recently told she was certain to pass. To such a brilliant girl, having a junior high school graduate as her stepmother, even if only in name, must have been shameful. I tried to tell myself that the tension was due to her upcoming exams and tried to avoid provoking her. When I entered her room to clean as she asked, it was, as expected, a complete mess. She probably thought no matter how messy she got, I would clean it up right away. Sighing, I began tidying her room. What am I to them? Their behavior hardly seemed like that of a family. I had to constantly be mindful and on edge around both my husband and daughter. I wanted us to get along because we were family. But sadly, I was the only one who felt that way. In reality, they belittled, insulted, and used me every day. On the surface, our family seemed peaceful because I endured it all. But then, something happened that caused a definitive crack in our fragile peace. The catalyst was Emily's college admission. She had finally achieved her dream of getting accepted into a prestigious medical school. The entrance ceremony was next month on campus. I was supposed to attend with Mike. Even with Mike's infidelity, he was already over 50 years old. I didn't know who the other woman was, but it was probably just a fleeting affair. Given time, I hoped we could become a real family. I clung to that faint hope. But that hope was soon to be cruelly dashed. Hey, what time will you be home today? I asked Mike as he was getting ready for work. Huh? Today, well, I don't have any overtime, so it should be early. Remember, we plan to celebrate Emily's college acceptance today. I'll prepare a feast, so make sure you come home early. Yeah, I gotta go now. Mike said this, grabbed his work bag, and hurriedly left through the front door. I shrugged it off and decided to start preparing for the celebration. It would be the first time in a while that the three of us would have dinner together. By 8 p.m., I was sitting alone in the living room, waiting anxiously for them to return. The ticking of the clock seemed unusually loud, amplifying my unease. He said he'd be home early, but he's not. Worried, I tried calling Mike's phone, but all I got was the automated message saying he was unavailable. I couldn't reach Emily either, even though she should have been home from school by now. Could something have happened to both of them? As I was debating whether to call the police, I heard the front door suddenly creaked open. Ah, that was delicious. Thanks, Dad, it was the best celebration ever. For you, it was nothing. After all, we were celebrating your acceptance into medical school. The two seemed to be in high spirits. I was relieved that it wasn't an accident, but I wondered where they had been and what they had been doing. What's with you? You look even more miserable than usual. Oh, Dad, isn't that just her usual gloomy face? When I said welcome home, they looked at my face and burst out laughing, snickering. It was the usual laugh they used to mock me. I told you to come home early today. I couldn't reach either of you, and I was worried. When I asked in a strong tone, I got a surprising answer. Oh, did you say that? Anyway, the celebration is already done. I took Emily out to eat. She had been talking about this restaurant for a while. It was delicious, thanks, Dad. Oh, what's this? Emily pointed to the food on the dining table that I had prepared. It was filled with all of Emily's favorite dishes, carefully arranged. I had started preparing since the morning, timing everything so it would be at its best when they got home. But now it was all cold, making it even more pitiful. We were supposed to celebrate your acceptance today, and yet, why? Sorry, I completely forgot. Mike laughed nonchalantly without a hint of remorse. But, you know, the food at the place we went today was definitely better than this. Yeah, that's true. That restaurant was really great. They laughed insensitively. That's awful. I worked so hard to prepare this. I squeezed out the words with a trembling voice. I was always belittled by the two of them, but today's treatment was unbearable. You're annoying. I was in a good mood after eating something delicious, and you ruined it. Mike clicked his tongue in annoyance, walked briskly to the dining table, and grabbed one of the plates of food. Then, he walked to the kitchen and casually threw it into the trash. What are you doing? Stop it. It's your fault for making all this food just to feel self-important. I'll clean it up. Ignoring my pleas, Mike continued to throw the food into the trash. Emily watched, smirking as if it were amusing. There, it's done. Stop whining already, it's annoying. Geez, why is she so incompetent? It's because she didn't go to high school so that she's so slow-witted, huh? Seeing the ruined celebration dishes in the trash, tears of frustration welled up in my eyes. This was to celebrate your acceptance. Why are you being so mean? I didn't ask for this. Oh, by the way, you weren't planning on coming to the entrance ceremony, were you? What do you mean by that? What? Are you seriously planning to come to the ceremony? How shameless. Someone with just a middle school diploma shouldn't come to the entrance ceremony. Let me be clear, you're not my mother. And I will never acknowledge you as such. Emily said this to me in a strong tone. Next to her, Mike smirked instead of reprimanding his daughter. This must be her true feelings. It made me feel sad. I had hoped that Emily's admission to college would be the turning point for our family. But that hope was not only unfulfilled, it was trampled by none other than my own family. If I continued to endure as I always had, things would remain peaceful. But if I did nothing, I would be under their control forever. That was something I couldn't accept. All right, if you insist, I won't attend the entrance ceremony. But you will both regret this. Mustering all my courage, I looked them both in the eye and said this. Mike and Emily, noticing my unusual demeanor, momentarily wore serious expressions before reverting to their usual mocking smiles. Regret? Us? What's with the sudden attitude? Don't be a sore loser just because you're upset. Then, as usual, the two of them started laughing and mocking me. Watching them, my heart grew cold, but that only fueled my resolve. I would make them regret it. My mind was filled with thoughts of revenge. On the day of her entrance ceremony. Without saying a word to me, they both left for the university. Well then. I better get ready too. Once I confirmed that they had left the house, I started packing all my belongings into the travel bag I had prepared in advance. I wondered when those two would realize what had happened. They would never have imagined that the person they had looked down on would take such action. "Hey Anna. What do you think you're doing?" The ceremony was supposed to start at 10 a.m. Just after that, as expected, I got a call from Mike on my cell phone. When I answered the phone, Mike was furious beyond belief. "Oh, what's the rush? Isn't the ceremony just starting? Shouldn't you be focusing on that instead of calling me?" I could hear Emily's hysterical screams in the background. "This is unbelievable. They told me my admission was revoked because the tuition wasn't paid. How could you do this to me?" Even without being there, I knew exactly what had happened. It was only natural for the two of them to be in a panic. Because Emily's spot at the ceremony wasn't reserved. They had confidently gone to the university, but they must have discovered at the reception that Emily's name wasn't on the list. They likely confronted the university staff to find out what was going on, only to discover for the first time that Emily's admission had been revoked. I wish I could have seen the shocked look on their faces at that moment. "Because of you, we were humiliated. What am I supposed to do about my education now? Take responsibility." Emily's voice was hysterical and tearful as she blamed me. But hearing that, I didn't feel sorry for them at all. Instead, I thought they got what they deserved. "We're coming back right now, and you better explain yourself. Wait at home, got it?" Mike yelled and hung up the phone. A little while later, the two of them came home, breathing heavily with anger, and immediately started questioning me. But I couldn't back down now. With a calm demeanor, I faced them head on. "What were you thinking? You were supposed to pay the tuition. You promised Emily's tuition and fees would come from your inheritance. What were you thinking?" "Inheritance? What are you talking about?" The inheritance Mike mentioned came from my late grandfather. My parents both passed away over a decade ago. My mother was the daughter of a high-ranking executive at a large company, but my father never received my grandfather's approval to marry her. It was because my father was an ordinary man, deemed unworthy of my mother. However, my parents eloped against all opposition, and I was born shortly after. Sadly, my father died of illness soon after their marriage. My mother, now a single parent, chose not to rely on her disowned family and raised me on her own despite many hardships. But being a sheltered daughter, she struggled to find stable employment, and we lived in extreme poverty. Consequently, I decided not to attend high school and started working after finishing middle school. My mother often apologized to me, but I never minded, as helping my beloved mother was a source of pride for me. When I was in my early 20s, my mother died in a car accident. Somehow, my grandfather found out about my mother's passing and suddenly contacted me. He lamented deeply about his daughter's death, which he had not known about, and the impoverished life she had endured because of his actions. Not long after, my grandfather also passed away from illness around the time I married Mike. At my grandfather's funeral, I was given surprising news. "You're Anna, right? Your grandfather left a will for you. Please take a look at this." A man I didn't know handed me a letter. He was the general counsel for my grandfather's company. When I opened the letter and read it, I was astonished. It was my grandfather's will, stating that he had left an inheritance for me. The letter expressed his deep regret and sorrow for disowning his daughter. And he also wrote that he wanted to ensure that his granddaughter, me, would never face financial difficulties and left an inheritance for that purpose. I unexpectedly received a substantial amount of money, but I decided not to tell anyone except my husband Mike. Not even Emily. This money was precious to me because it was left by my grandfather, who thought of me, and I didn't want to use it frivolously. When I told Mike about the inheritance, he claimed he had a right to it. When he demanded half of it, I firmly told him it wasn't his allowance. From then on, Mike's attitude toward me turned cold. I intended to use the inheritance for emergencies for our family. So, when Emily became a high school student aspiring to attend medical school, I told Mike that I wanted to use the inheritance for her education costs. Medical school expenses were too much to manage on Mike's salary alone. Using my grandfather's inheritance, I could support Emily's dreams. Despite Mike's terrible attitude towards me, he agreed to use the inheritance for her because he cared for her. Emily, however, didn't know the money was coming from me. I thought it wasn't necessary to tell her, considering Mike's pride as her father. I had always tried to consider the best interests of my husband and daughter. But being humiliated at Emily's celebration made me realize something. To them, I was not part of the family. They only saw me as a convenient tool. I had endured their mistreatment because I believed in family, but this incident made me realize. If I wasn't considered family, I had no obligation to pay for her education. When I checked the university documents, it stated that the admission fee had to be paid within 2 weeks of receiving the acceptance notice. If the payment was even a day late, the admission would be cancelled. So, I didn't pay the admission fee. All the procedures for her admission were, of course, left entirely to me, so Mike and Emily wouldn't realize it until the day of the ceremony. How did they feel when they went to the entrance ceremony that I was told not to attend? They must have been bewildered when they couldn't find her name anywhere. Although I wasn't there to see it, from their reactions over the phone, it seemed my revenge plan had succeeded. It's a shame after all the hard work you put into studying, but you can try again next year. What are you thinking? Ruining your daughter's future like that? You're a disgrace as a mother. I coldly responded to Emily, who was ranting in anger. Emily, you said it yourself. You said I wasn't your mother. That was just an expression. You know, families say things like that all the time. Realizing that her position was becoming unfavorable, Emily quickly shifted her tone and began making excuses to me. You didn't pay the admission fee over such a trivial thing? What kind of woman are you? Meanwhile, Mike continued to yell at me in a domineering manner. He was livid that the wife he looked down on had rebelled. But being yelled at wasn't gonna make me back down now. Trivial? I've been enduring this for a long time. You two were the ones who created the final straw. Both Emily and you crossed a line that should never have been crossed. This is ridiculous. Stop talking nonsense and come to the university right now. Get Emily admitted. Mike suddenly grabbed my hand and yanked it forcefully, stomping towards the front door with heavy footsteps. But no matter how much I asked, there was no way the university would grant admission now. And I had no intention of doing what Mike said. Stop it. Let go of me. How long do you think you can control me? I forcibly shook off his hand and shouted. Mike seemed surprised by my fierce reaction, as I had never spoken back or resisted so strongly before. Why should I go that far for your daughter? Huh? What are you talking about? You obstructed her future. I no longer consider Emily my daughter. And you and I are no longer husband and wife. So, I will be a stranger to her as well. Both Mike and Emily were stunned and confused by my words. They didn't seem to understand what I meant. Oh, what are you saying? I want a divorce. I've endured horrible treatment from both you and Emily. Being neglected and mocked every day. I'm at my limit. That's ridiculous. You didn't pay the admission fee over something so trivial? I've done nothing wrong. It's just your weak mentality. Even after hearing my grievances, Mike showed no remorse and took a defiant stance. It seemed that, in Mike's mind, no matter how much he mistreated me, it was perfectly acceptable as a husband. I realized he was hopelessly unaware of his own cruelty. How can you say that? I wanted to be a real family with you both. But you trampled on that desire, and I'm not kind enough to stay silent about it. I had endured so much over the years. But the incident that ruined my love for my family gave me the courage to stand up to them. And it's not just about your usual behavior. You've completely disrespected me. But I know about your affair with that young woman from your office. I revealed the trump card I had been keeping hidden. It was about Mike's affair. As I had suspected for some time, I had confirmed that Mike was having an affair with another woman. That's ridiculous. I haven't done anything like that. You're delusional. If you think it's a delusion, take a look at this. These are photos of you with your mistress and a report from the private investigator. What? You suspect your own husband to this extent? Mike's face turned pale, as he never imagined he was being watched. Of course. You thought you were cleverly hiding it from me, but you underestimated me. I knew from my past experiences that Mike would never admit to the affair if confronted directly. So, I secretly hired a private investigator to look into his activities. The report confirmed that his mistress was a young employee from his company. Mike claimed he was working late every day, but I discovered it was a lie to spend time with his mistress. Are you really gonna leave me? Yes, I've already signed the divorce papers. I thrust the signed divorce papers in front of Mike. I won't accept this. How can I listen to such a one-sided decision? Mike, enraged, shouted and spat as he yelled, but no matter how loud he got, I was no longer the person who would do his bidding. Well then, it's unfortunate, but this will go to court. And of course, I have plenty of evidence of your affair. Court? That's too extreme. Wait, just hold on a minute. Seeing Mike panic at the mention of court was almost amusing. Despite his usual tough demeanor, he was fundamentally a coward. You leave me no choice since you won't agree to the divorce. My lawyer will be in touch. Goodbye. Wait, Mom. What about my university? Hey. Wait, please. Let's talk this out calmly. If we do, you'll see it's all just a misunderstanding. Ignoring the two of them shouting, I grabbed the bag I had prepared. After years of suffering, I was finally leaving this house. I walked out the door with a light heart, ignoring their attempts to stop me. Afterward, Mike and Emily desperately explained the situation to the university. But no exceptions were made, and Emily's admission remained revoked. At her high school, Emily was known as the top student, and everyone knew she had gotten into a prestigious medical school. That's why news of her admission being cancelled spread quickly. Emily's friends, who already disliked her arrogant personality, had no sympathy for her. Instead, they gossiped about how she had lost her admission because she mistreated her mother, calling her a fool behind her back. In the end, Emily tried to take the entrance exam again the following year but failed this time. With her high pride and vanity, she couldn't bear the reality of having to repeat the exam multiple times, lost her motivation to study, and eventually became a recluse. It's Dad's fault. You ruined my life by marrying that woman. Give me my life back. Why did this happen to me? Emily, without reflecting on her actions, apparently took out her anger on her father, shouting at him. Once a top student at an elite high school and accepted into a prestigious medical school, she had now drastically changed. As for my ex-husband Mike, he resisted the divorce for a long time, but my lawyer was excellent, and he finally agreed to it reluctantly. Although the emotional scars from his verbal abuse haven't healed, I'm glad I was able to give him some measure of retribution. After the divorce, Mike tried to marry his mistress, but the young woman wasn't genuinely interested in him and quickly left him. Mike had been spending money and buying luxury items for her. The reason for their breakup was likely that he could no longer afford to shower her with gifts and money after our divorce. She was completely in it for the money. His mistress left the company soon after and disappeared, so I didn't take any action against her. Although I could have pursued her for damages, knowing that she had cruelly dumped Mike was enough satisfaction for me. I knew that no young woman would seriously stay with a man like Mike. Mike, mistakenly believing he was still attractive, was too carried away to realize the reality. Eventually, news of Mike's affair reached the HR department of his company. Given the company's strict compliance policies, his performance reviews suffered significantly. Although he had been promoted to a department head, due to the scandal, he could no longer expect any further promotions and might even be demoted to a regular employee. At work, he was the subject of ridicule, and at home, he lived with his reclusive, unemployed daughter. Unable to bear this life, he once called my phone after the divorce. Anna, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please come back. I can't manage without you. I'm begging you. His attitude was insincere, and I knew he was just trying to gain my sympathy. Mike was a domineering husband who couldn't do any household chores at all. He probably intended to make me take care of his reclusive daughter and do all the household chores. That's convenient for you. But I'm not gonna be your housekeeper anymore. If you contact me again, I'll speak to my lawyer. I married you because I thought you were an obedient woman. Fine. I won't contact you again, not that I need to be told. Enjoy your lonely life after leaving me. In contrast to his earlier attitude, Mike ended the call with a spiteful parting shot before hanging up. This would likely be the last time he would ever contact me. I breathed a sigh of relief. I later heard through the grapevine that Mike eventually left the company. After being demoted to a regular employee, he couldn't tolerate being reassigned to a window-side position. He tried to find another job, but companies weren't keen on hiring. The only job he could get was a part-time position at a cleaning company. His income dropped significantly, and life became much harder, but Emily still refused to work and remained a shut-in. They exhausted their savings and had to sell their house. Now, the two of them have moved to a cheap apartment, living a miserable life. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction hearing about the downfall of the two people I once lived with as a family. I knew their characters better than anyone else. They would probably continue their miserable lives, holding a grudge against me. After divorcing Mike, I decided to start fresh and moved to a distant place. I moved to a rural area rich in nature, which was a bit inconvenient, but I decided to start a business there. Since marrying Mike, I had been a housewife, but I had always been good at cooking and had previously worked in a restaurant. The availability of fresh, delicious vegetables in the countryside encouraged me to start a small cafe featuring dishes made with organic produce. I was grateful to use my grandfather's inheritance as the startup capital for the cafe. Although it was a new challenge at first, fortunately, the cafe became a big hit, and now it's running smoothly. Living with Mike and Emily, I had always lacked confidence and lived in fear of being scolded. But thanks to a bit of courage, I found a place where I could live true to myself.